Dan Potts on November 22nd, 1992, and we're going to be putting my mother, Dorothy Ferris Potts' family history and personal history on tape here for all of her children and all of her posterity, so that we'll have something to look back and remember her by. With that introduction, the way we'll do this is I'll ask some questions and present some key words, and hopefully it will spur on some memories that Mom has had of her past, and we'll get her opinions of different subjects. So that's the format we'll take. Mom, can you tell us when you were born?
I was born on the 26th of July, 1910,
Okay, and where were you born?
in Belfast, Northern Ireland.
Okay. I'd like tonight to get some memories that you have of you different family members, and we'll start off with your father. What memories come to mind when you think of your dad?
Well, he was a tempered person. He was one that would usually take you to the dentist and the doctors and any place that you had to go.
How would he take you?
He would walk you or go. He used to be a tram conductor, and we used to meet him with his lunch. We would wait at a certain place for him and take his lunch and go over and...
A train conductor?
Tram.
What's a tram conductor?
Tram is like well, it's a little different to the streets of San Francisco cars that run there. They were a little larger.
But something like that?
Something similar.
Okay.
And there was a tram conductor and the driver, and there was upstairs in them too.
Okay. So he used to take you on the tram if you had
Yeah,
someplace to
if
go?
we needed, he used to go to, he was a great sportsman. He liked rugby a lot. He used to go there and be a part of the rugby teams playing. I think he was more or less taking the money, the tickets and all, part like that.
At the rugby games?
He liked to go to those.
Did he play?
No, he did. Not that I ever knew of. I used to see him there, and he would take us, one or two of us who wanted to go with him. Of course, it wasn't a year-round thing,
Yeah.
And he would have one or two of us together of the family to take.
Okay.
But anytime we needed to go to with our teeth or to the doctor and all, he would take us. He didn't seem to mind that at all. And he had a lot of service in the army when he was growing up. We don't remember his our grandparents on his side that I know of. I think they died when he was a young man. He had a sister and a brother. John was the brother's name, and Agnes was his sister's name. That's who Aggie's called after, my own sister. And we knew her well, but as I understand, John was over in Canada living. He had gone over there to...
Your dad's brother?
Yes, the brother. And they kept not too much in touch with each other. He kept in touch with his sister, for she lived not too far from us. We used to go up to see her and help her clean her home and all too, from time to time. but she was a different personality to my father. As I said, I don't remember the grandparents, so we can't very well tell just who was taken after who, or what sort of parents they were. But the brother and sister were my father's guardian. When he joined the army, he was supposed to be 2 years older than what he was, and he was in the Boer War. He served.
What was the Boer War?
The Boer War was a war way early on before World War I, and it was in Africa. And he was, I heard him talking about being a bat boy. Now, it's hard people when you say bat, they think of...
baseball.
Yes, they think like that. But that wasn't it. It was a person who was under officers who done things for them. They shined their shoes, looked after their uniform, done their buttons and all too, It was a sort of a person
Kind
like
of
that.
an officer's assistant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he was in there and he got some medals, ribbons that he wore, and I don't know where they ever went to. Must have been destroyed now that I think back on them. And then he was in the First World War. He had something to do with the Royal Enniskillen Fusiliers, they called him. He was 17 and a half years in the service. So that took a lot of time away from home.
Yeah.
And all too. And he was married then. He was married at 26 years of age, and my mother was 22.
So maybe 7 of his years in the service he was married.
Yeah, because he, as I say, he joined up early, he said
Yeah.
he was 2 years older, and they were able then to get him through into the service, and so that was when he was living with his brother and his sister before Agnes, I guess, was married, and before John went over to Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, John was a very tall person, and so was Agnes. She was a good sized person. My father was the average size. My mother and father were average size.
What did your father look like other than height?
Well, that picture there beside Violet, or Althea, is a picture of my father. It's in there.
Yeah.
So
well, I can go get that, I guess.
But
hang on.
you know picture.
Yeah. There's a picture of your dad. Let me see if I can zero in a little bit. Hold it up a little higher.
Is
Okay.
that high enough?
Yeah. That's your dad. Looks like he was kind of, thin.
Yeah, he wasn't. He was like yourself there. He had a.
He was about as tall as I am.
Yeah.
About
Or maybe a
5'8".
Well, 5'9", as I
5'9",
understand, was
okay.
he was
So
growing
maybe
up
just-
when he went into the Boer War. He wasn't fairly. He was sandy-haired and blue-eyed. He only shaved twice a week, but he was so.
Didn't have a real thick beard.
No, he didn't. So,
All right, you can put that down now. Got a good shot. That's your mother.
Yeah, she was a little smaller. She was a very good-looking woman. She was, as my father was sandy-haired, she was black-haired and grey eyes.
Okay.
She was a beautiful type of person.
Yes.
Beautiful person.
Was she short?
Well, she was a little smaller than my father. She wasn't, the same size as him.
Maybe she was 5'4" or something.
Well, a little more. She was average size, which I think was a little bit more than that. But both of them were average size people. And
Okay.
I had, they had 6 girls
Okay.
and 2 boys.
Well, let's go back to your
Oh,
father for a
yeah.
minute, and we'll go to your mother after that. So your father was in the service for the first 17 years.
17 and a half years.
And then, well, he met your mother about 10 years into his service career.
Yeah, she was 22 and he was 26 when they were married, and I don't know how long they had been going together.
Do you know anything about their courtship?
No, not that I can remember right off. That I understood that the couple that were going to be standing along with them, you know, as her witness and his witness, they decided to play a trick on them. They wanted to get married too. So my mother and father had their date set up to be married. It was at an Easter time.
Mm-hmm.
And they thought they would get married before them.
So
This
they
prayer, but they wouldn't let my mother and father know. But someone told them. So they turned round and they got married before them. And so they cheated them out of their
Did them one better, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I always remember that about them. But father was easy to get along with. He was, I guess with being in the army as he was growing up, he started to take a drink or two of beer.
Mm-hmm.
But where some people drink beer and it makes them a little angry and out of hand when they drink, it made him happy. He used to sing. He'd come home and he had been singing all around the house, and you know, you weren't afraid of him when he had been drinking.
Mm-hmm.
He was kind of warm-hearted and all too, and telling you all about the time he was in the war and what he'd done and all, and the things that happened. That's the way he was. So it was good that he was a person that you didn't mind the beer or drinking.
Did he smoke?
He smoked a
pipe?
pipe. He couldn't smoke cigarettes, he told us. I don't know why. He said he never was comfortable with them. And we used to buy him at Christmas time, the pipes for a Christmas present, and the stuff that went with them. Used to do that Christmas time.
Okay.
But he held many jobs, my father. He was a pretty well educated man. Not that he had to go through college or anything, but he was sort of self-educated. There used to be neighbours, when they wanted to know anything, would come to him and ask him what they should do about certain things that happened or was going to happen in their lives, and he would tell them, you know, how to go about it.
Okay. Can you remember, other than the army and the tram operator, can you remember any other occupations?
That's what I was trying to think of. I remember so well being tram conductor, because I used to take his lunch up a lot. But I remember him, he was on the street like a construction worker.
Okay.
He worked along that. In fact, there was a time whenever he was on the construction work that some woman in the street gave him a beautiful things for the garden, for the backyard, roses.
Mm-hmm.
And we had them planted in our backyard. Wasn't open like most of them are here, you know. They were closed in. And but I remember those roses growing up yellow.
Mm-hmm.
Where they were always a beautiful sight. I have a picture of him. I don't know where it was. I should have had time, but I haven't even thought about it, or could have got it out. Where he's standing in the front of a construction crew. You know, someone took their picture. So,
So what are your favorite memories, you and your dad?
well, they told me, I don't know whether it's true or not, but they told me I was his favorite person of the family. And then there was one time that I always remember that when we had candy, we would offer him some, but he never would eat it. He would put it in his pocket. And then when we would be in need of candy, he would tell us to go to his pocket and take what we needed.
Stash there.
He was like that. He liked the smoking. He didn't smoke a lot, but I always liked to see him, even with the pipe in his mouth. It didn't seem to bother you, And the cigarette smoking these days, it seemed to bother people a lot, and it never bothered me at that time. And I always enjoyed watching him with a pipe in his mouth. And as I told you the story about the cat last week, about this cat, that it just was so fond of him that it knew every step of the way where he was out, when he would come to the door, and before he even got near it, it used to be ready to meet him. You knew that Dad was coming.
Yeah.
When you seen the cat standing to getting ready for him coming. It was so fond of him, and he used to it would walk up and down the house with him. And young John, Violet's boy, when he was born, he was the first grandchild, and he used to walk up and down with Granddad all the time. He walked up and down the kitchen, and they would talk to each other, and we didn't have a big kitchen, a long kitchen or anything, so they were up and down many times, but he enjoyed it because Aggie, my sister, she would take him out on a Sunday morning, mostly in the summer, take him away, long walks. When he was a little boy, he spent nearly every weekend at our home.
Mm-hmm. The first grandchild.
John.
Yeah.
He was very fond. He was, yeah.
Okay.
But he always have good thoughts of my father. When I read about teenagers and all and running down their parents, now it makes me wonder what kind of a family life they had, because I can never say anything about my parents at all that was bad, or that they were parents that didn't care about us, or that they abused us in any way, or they were always there, and they took care of our needs, and we didn't have much. We had a roof over our head, and we were able to eat and be clothed and all, but we hadn't a lot of riches or things that we needed to have. That was no need of. But there were.
Did you guys ever go like on a family vacation with your?
Well, no, I don't mind a lot of that, because when my father went to these rugby meetings, there were a certain time in the year he would go off, on his own, anytime he didn't feel like going with him or wanting to be there, and he would go, but he never was one. I don't remember that we ever had anything together, because when we were growing up, he had, as I say, 17.5 years service, and so he wasn't there a lot. When he was in Africa, he just don't get home every weekend from Africa.
Yeah.
And the First World War too, he was away pretty often, so that we didn't see him. And I was the fourth one in the family. There was Evelyn was the first, and then there was Norman. He was a young man. He was 6 foot. And then there was Ruby, and then there was myself. I was the fourth one. And then there was Jeannie, she was burned. And then there was Agnes, and then there was Violet, and then there was Douglas. It was the second and the last were boys.
Yeah. We'll get to your
Yeah.
brothers and sisters and all that. Okay, anything else you want to say about your father?
Well, I can't think of unless there's something that you would remember me about. I mean, or something that would come into my mind. Oh,
Okay. Let's talk about your mother then. What do you remember about her?
well, I could, just right off I could say she was a lovely person. She was a very ladylike person. And she had quite a few good qualifications about it. She had been what we would call a clerk when she was a young woman growing up. Now, I don't know anything.
That'd be a clerk in a store?
I can't think of it right
Or in
now.
an office?
An office. She was the only one of her family at the time. Her mother and father were married because her father died and her mother married again. So that there were step children on the other side, you know. And but she was a beautiful woman, my mother, as you can see in this picture. She had black hair, and she had gray eyes, very beautiful skin. It was clear, her features and all were clear. And she was brought up by an uncle and an aunt. Apparently, from what I know of the history, she had been a young woman and grown up with them because of the death of one of the parents, and then the other parent married again. So this uncle and aunt, Donnelly, they called him John Donnelly. Oh, he was a tall man. He was like Mr. Two. He was so tall, and his wife was too. They lived next door to us in Carlow Street. And it was in that home that she grew up in. They reared her. And
With her aunt and uncle?
yeah. But they were just like parents to her. So what else now right off in my mind? I tried to be thinking of so many things that I don't remember many of the things she was the kind of a person that wouldn't say one word against anyone, even if it was true. You know, many times people, she would loan things and they would never return them. She had good things, good clothes, and she had good jewelry, and she had other things that were presents given to her and all that was owned by her that she would loan up to other people, and she never received them back again. Never. She was a good mother. And when you have 8 children, you need to be a good mom.
Yeah,
to
that's a big thing.
rear them up. We all went to the same school, you know. We all went, and just one after the other went. But you don't want to hear about the family at first, or do you?
We'll get into that.
So, my mother, she worked quite a bit of her life.
Worked as what?
She was
The
in
clerk?
the mill work, and after growing up with such, education, she was an educated person too, like my father. She was self-educated, and she knew her place and knew what to say and when to say it and all, whenever there was the need to. And she had a neighbour. We had a neighbour that lived next door, and we used to call her Aunt Maggie. She wasn't her aunt at all by blood, you know, being a relative, but she was that kind. And whenever they wanted one another, to see one another, they would knock on the wall. You would guess that the walls were so thin that they were able to know Maggie would rap on our wall for my mother to come, or if my mother wanted Maggie, she would rap on that wall, you know, and bring them in. And this Aunt Maggie, she had two brothers. Her parents had died, and one was blind. He was fully blind. And they had a good friendship between them, the three of them, with us as a family. But my mother didn't, you know, she wasn't a person that over the backyard, you know, talking or anything like that. She worked hard in the mill for years.
What kind of a mill?
It was let me think.
Clothes mill?
I worked in it myself. Linen.
Yeah.
Linen, yes. And she shouldn't have been in there at all. She wasn't a person that should have been in a place like that. I always felt she was too good to work there, but it was very close to us. It was almost, we could have walked to it, you know, it was so close to where we lived. And I can't remember just right off now how long she worked there. She worked years.
She worked there while your father was
out of work and all too a lot, that he wasn't able to have any work at the time, or such as the construction work, that it wouldn't have been available all the time.
Sometimes that was seasonal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but they both, my father was like almost a woman in his cleanliness, and he learned this in the army. He wasn't a dirty type of a person that left things on the floor or around him or anything. He was very clean. And when he even went to this construction job, he would clean his boots every night, scrape mud off them, and clean them up. He was that perfect in that sense of the word, of keeping himself in a clean way. And as I say, he shaved about twice a week.
Yeah.
He was so clean shaven.
Oh, getting back to your mother, what are some of your favorite memories with your mom?
Well, I'm trying to think. I always think we have some pictures of her too, and I can't remember where they all are. There's one of them with one of our family sitting on her knee. She always took good pictures. She had good features, as you see in the picture. And she didn't, she went to church on Sunday. She used to go with a woman, a neighbour across the street, and another woman, and the three of them would go to church on Sundays. It was just a little meeting. Both her and my father were married in St. Matthew's Church. They were married, and it's one of the oldest churches in Belfast. It's a beautiful little church, but they closed it up, I believe, lately, and they don't use it. And there's a grave side where the parents she lived with, I'm calling them parents because they just seemed like that to her, they're buried there. And we used to go up very often to the graveside and on a Sunday to see the graves. They owned these graves. They owned the ground and all too. There was a lot of them. So he was a pretty good person, this man that was her father in the sense of the word, that he took care of him and the wife. And he was a very tall person, very stately of a man, and his wife too. And my mother lived, they were able to take care of her while my father was away in the army a lot, when she was at home with us as young children, you know. So she never did go out a lot. She was never one for running around, you know, and going out here and there. She attended this little church meeting because it was close by, and they would have a lot of picnics and things.
Well, did you go together as a family to church?
My father didn't go to church. He did when he was a young man. He used to attend church very often. In fact, I had his one of his books that he was presented with his name and all on it for Sunday school. But he never was a church goer, although whenever I was started to go to the church meetings and the missionaries would come up, he never said anything against him coming, visiting. Both him and my mother would listen, and they were that kind of people. They just would listen to the what the missionary said and what was told to them. And my mother was a very good type of person. She never felt angry, and she never contradicted anyone, and she was always very pleasant to be around. She was more of what you call a kindred spirit. She was that type, and we all get on with her. All the family, we were close together as a family, but not as a church-going family.
Yeah.
That is after they were married and all too. They didn't. My mother did. My mother was a good person for going to church, and I think that I took after her in that sense, because the rest of them didn't go as often as I did. I used to go on my own. I was on my own too whenever I went to start the church meetings to the Church of Jesus Christ. I went with some friends that I knew, and they never denied me that.
Yeah.
But my mother was a very, very good person in that sense. She loved the church, she loved God, and she loved church work. You know, she took part in whatever that they had, and she didn't mind me going to church either, because I used to be the one that would go. I would go to the meetings.
Did she like any kind of sports or?
No, she wasn't like that. She never was against any sports. I mean, my father used to go, and as I say, he had his side of sports that he kept up and all too, and the smoking didn't bother her either. And him and her had a good enough married life together. They seemed to get on well together, because they were two of a kind that they seemed to be able to get along with each other well. They never, as I say, he was a man that was easy to get along with, and she was a person too that never troubled anyone or bothered. Even at home, we had a good family togetherness. She was a good, very good person.
enjoy.
Well, same to you, but don't
Trisha.
drink that here.
You gotta have manners. Do you know what manners are?
You better come over
Eyes
here.
are green. Manners are etiquette. Do you know what etiquette is?
You better come over here and film Trisha.
Now, what is
I understand
it,
that she's under the table. Trisha!
Come over
What
here and you
is
can
it?
see her at full fury.
Heidi? I want to hear you tell me what etiquette
She's
is.
eating what we're calling Althea's worm.
It's like manners. She's like, use
The
proper
worms are really
etiquette.
just wonderful rolls.
Does that
Is
mean we have to hold our
Use
little
proper
pinky?
etiquette.
No,
when
Thea
you
made.
You can't.
Hold your little,
You can't be
hold your little
Oh.
It's the meal. What?
His hand.
Proper etiquette when you're drinking. You guys, I'm the one who gave you the lesson.
Snort like a pig.
Guys, and I'll see.
Like on a
Bigger
day.
than all told, but trouble on it.
Cynthia!
Right. We'll have to see
Make
if
sure that
you use
doping
that
is
on
up
your
in
day.
I don't even
Squirt
remember.
after every
Oh, I
bite.
do. You point your
Use
toes.
your fingers.
And act like a lady. You can't have any fun at all.
Yep.
Over here. Right here. I didn't say that.
I
I learned that from the
did.
song. I learned that from an alligator song. What?
I don't
see it.
Only mom can.
That's James Bond over
In
there.
the middle of that jumping jump.
Did you change the,
So
let her work
talking about, you know, I only know that her mother was a Campbell, you know, Mary, you call her Mother Mahood, you know, but her mother was a Campbell, and so I must know there must be connections because of Scotland is the only place where you would hear that name, you know, Campbells. Being that's all
Who was a Campbell?
my mother's mother.
Your mother's mother.
Yeah. My mother was a Mahood, you know, and Mary Jane Mahood. She was called after the mother, and she was Jane Campbell. And we didn't. Well, I knew my uncle and aunt when they lived next door and all. I was very young at the time, and he his grave up in the Schenkel graveyard, they had those big glass things. They used to have them. They were all the gold. I seen a couple of them in some of the cemeteries around here. I don't know which ones it was, but his was quite high and all too. And he had 4 or 5 graves that he owned up in the Schenkel graveyard, but it was small. It was near the church where they were married in St. Matthew's. It was a nice part of place, and it was one of the oldest churches. It's a beautiful place up there at St. Matthew's, and the graveyard wasn't far from it, and he owned graves there, and then it was closed up. Is there something wrong with it? So many things in our, it's been so long, and I know they looked after her after my mother. She was brought up with them, you know, and it must have been, I don't know how my father and mother met. I never did ever hear how they got together, but he'd been in the army for 17 and a half years, you know, and whether it was on one of those times that he came home that they met, I don't know. But
Well, let's talk about your brothers and sisters for a
yeah,
minute.
well,
Your first one was
Evelyn Armour.
What do you remember about her?
Well, she was the eldest of the family, and she was light-haired and clear-skinned. She was a good size. Sister Evelyn, she had long hair. She grew it down to her back, and one day, I don't know whether, you know, you probably wouldn't know about it, the bob came in, and it was all the fashion. The hair was cut, you know,
okay.
and she went and got her hair cut and didn't tell my mother and father, although she brought the hair back from where she went. don't know to this day where she got it cut, but it was beautiful hair, beautiful brown, and she had a down to her waist. It was lovely, and she was a nice looking person. They called her Eva for short, although her full name was Evelyn Armour. She was called after, I understand, a nurse. Maybe it was where she was born, you know, that one of the nurses in there was a place called Townsend Maternity Hospital. But she was a quiet person and all, and I can't even remember what she died of. I can't, she was...
Did she die young?
Oh, she wasn't married. That's the thing. They all died before they were ever married. And the last three of us girls were the only ones that were married. Oh, I can't, I'll have to look up the thing again and find out when she was born and when she died. But Norman was the next one. He was as black as my mother, black haired. You know, my mother, she was black haired, very black haired, grey eyes, beautiful complexion. She's a nice looking woman. And as I say, she was brought up with the aunt and uncle. They never had any family of their own. They had,
But back to Norman.
yeah.
What about Norman?
Norman was the second. He was 6 foot. He was a big fella, very slender, and he was like the father. He was slender too. You put me in mind of my father because, you know, he was slender, and they were just the average size, my mother and father, if you know what that means, the average. But Norman was 6 foot, and he was very tall. He was a very quiet type of young man, and he was very handsome looking, you know, with his, he was very much like my mother. And he used to stand out in the corners and all. I think he died of tuberculosis. He got wet and all too, and used to stand out in the corners with the other fellas that he played around with and all too, and got his lungs got bad, and he was...
Do you remember how old he was?
He was
when
about
died?
19, I think.
When he died?
When he died. Yeah. And he wasn't married either. And so then the next one was Ruby. She was the third one born. She was smaller than Eva. And her and I hadn't, they were all called after people, but Ruby and I, Norman Lloyd, they called my brother, and he was a very quiet type of a young man. He never bothered much with anyone, and I can't remember even working what he worked at. Can't think of it because I was born two below him, you know. And but he died about.
But what about Ruby?
Well, Ruby was the third one, and she was very black haired like my brother and like my mother. She was a lot. She had more flesh on her than I had, and she was a nice type. I tell you that Althea, when she was younger, looked like her, looked like Ruby, and Cindy too has a kind of a look from her that was like Ruby. And then I was fourth, and I was just called Dorothy, and I was light-haired like my father. We seemed to run, and every other one was like my mother or my father took after them, and I was like my father. And they told me that I was his favorite. Now I don't know about that. He used to take us to the doctors and to the dentist whenever it was needed. I never remember going with my mother. he always seemed to be taking it himself. And
Well, the next sister was Jeannie.
was
right?
Jeannie. Yeah, she was very dark too. She was a type taken after my mother, and she had a terrible tragedy. She was looked after this when she was only about 13 or 14. She baby tended for this couple who had a what we would say a pharmacy, you know, worked in a pharmacy, or they owned a pharmacy. And she had on, it was at an Easter time, and she had a new dress on and shoes and all too. She used to go up there on a Sunday morning and help to make breakfast for them and look after the little girl they had. And she went up that morning and got her up and all too while they stayed on in bed. And it was a lovely, warm, beautiful day. It was in the summer. But she had on her new clothes. And they had a stove. It was a low stove. It was gas. And it had been lit, you know, just to keep the heat in. And she prevented the little girl from going near it, you know, and kept her away from it, you know. But she got near it, and her dress, which was of silk, caught fire. And she knocked the little girl aside and ran out screaming to the backyard. They heard her screaming from their bedroom come down. She was enveloped in flames. And they took her to the hospital. They called the ambulance and they let my mother and father know. I remember going up that afternoon, and she died at midnight that night. It was a sad time.
She was how old?
She was only about 11, or was she? Was that the one that I had to tell him over again? She had to be baptized. I thought she was younger, and she was about 11. But it was a sad. Yeah, she was still at school and everything. And the next one then was Agnes. You know her. She was like my father. She was like her and all. And then she married, of course, Jack Gordon. You know, John Gordon or Jack Gordon.
How old was she when she got married?
Well, he used to go with Violet. You know, he was going.
Jack did?
Yeah, he was for a while, and then she met Johnny, and then he started to go with Aggie. And I can't, Violet was married first. She was the next one, but she was married first. She was married when she was about 20, and Johnny was 21. He worked in the shipyards. And Aggie and his brother, Johnny, his brother Willie, he stood for them. I have pictures of them. And then Aggie and Jack were married.
What age?
That's what I'm trying to think. I think she was older than that, and Aggie, or Violet. So, and then you know a good bit about Violet from being here in Canada. She died in 1980, you know. And then there was Douglas Haig. Violet was called after a friend in over in Liverpool, England. He was a captain of a boat, and she went over there, Violet, to stay with them for a while because she was called Violet Alexandra. And she was over at their place and stayed with them for a while. Her and the mother, his wife, was very good friends, my mother and her. And then there was Douglas, what did I say it was? Douglas Haig Ferris. He was Douglas Haig. They were all called after somebody except Ruby and as I told you, they didn't give us. I don't know where they got these names from. But Douglas, he died when he was blonde. He was like my father too. The half of his were black hair and the other half were fur after my father. And that was the 8 of us that,
What happened with Douglas?
you know, I can't, my mind's blank, it seems like now. I can't think of, he
Was
was
he the one that worked in the shipyard or something?
No, he, what just reminds me, it must have been that he was the youngest one in the Second World War, and he was with my mother and father the night that we had the Blitz, the bombing, and he was hurt too a little, and the home was destroyed and all. He had I had to take him down the next day to get a suit, get clothes for him, and they didn't have any. They had to go up to Violet's to stay that time, and my mother was taken into hospital, and my father, we never found his body. I was on Wednesday early morning, because the Blitz started at 20 minutes to 11, and I was supposed to be home at 11, and I had to stay all night there. It was 18 hours on duty that. And when I come home, there was no home to go to. Nobody knew where he was, and I was around the police.
Let's focus on Douglas, because we'll get.
Well,
into
Douglas was whenever the Blitz came that time, he was. My father had fixed seats for them in there. We have a little below the stairs where we kept the coal for burning in the fire, and he put them in there, and then underneath the table in the front room, he had put a bed underneath and was there on his own. And he came in one of the times to see if they were okay. He walked in his little distance from the living room into the scullery and into this little place where they kept him. And he asked them if they were all right and everything, and he was going back again when the bomb dropped, and he was killed right away. They were stuck in there. They had to come and get them out to, use a thing to get them out with. They were stuck in there. My mother didn't want them. She wanted them to go on. The people that came to rescue them to get them out, but she was taken to the hospital, and I don't remember much about it. I didn't know anything till the next morning. She was taken to the hospital, and I came, and a lot of neighbours were saying, how is your family and how's your father and all. I couldn't understand what they were talking about till I went down to the store, and I went in there, and they started to ask me about my father. Was he found yet or something? And I hadn't known. And they had to dig for his body,
Yeah, let's get back to Douglas.
Douglas.
You say he was hurt slightly.
He was hurt a little, but whenever there was such a confusion that time, because he had to go up to Violet's too to stay with them too, because he had nowhere to stay, And I had to go on that day at 3 o'clock to the first aid place. I had to go, and I had been running all morning after 18 hours on duty. And I had to take him down to get him clothes, because he had nothing on him. He was like a tramp. His clothes was all torn, and there was nothing he could get out of the house,
How old was Douglas at this time?
Well, I'm trying to think, and I can't think about him. I think he must have been a little younger than Norman when he, because they sent for him, what do you call them? The way that they sign up here, when you're 18 and all, the draft, and they sent for him at that time, and he had to go to England. And my mother was in a hospital, and they sent her away to another hospital about 50 miles away, and that I started to go around the hospitals and all, found my father in one of the hospitals, and I had to see to his funeral and all that. That was on Wednesday, and body was found on Friday, and I had to get the funeral services ready for Monday, and then Douglas had to go away, and my mother wanted us to bring her home, and so we had to go up there.
So Douglas was drafted in the
Uh,
he was
so
drafted in the Navy.
Yeah, he went over to England,
And then
Douglas. And then he was working over there doing different things when he turned sick again, because he shouldn't have been doing the heavy work over there, what he was doing after what he went through. And they were very nice in the hospital, and the matron even wrote over to my mother, and she told her that he wasn't doing too good and all. We couldn't get over to see him. And then we got the word to say that he had died. So we had to make the arrangements with the mortuary to have a steel casket to bring him over the water, you know. We had to bring him, and he was died too, and we had to see to his burial. So that was another thing. We had to bring my mother home. I had to go up. I didn't go up, so I can't remember. I think it was Johnny and Violet or someone went up for my mother, bring her home, and we had to look for another home to get, you know, before she come home. We did get one that round nearby. It was all, there was a lot wrong with it. We had nothing in it. It was just empty. It wasn't a thing, and we had no money to buy any. We had a table in it and one chair when my mother come home, and whenever she came home we had to the red light's still on. She had to, you know, have some treatment and everything because she wasn't well. She'd been in the blitz, you know, and had been a couple of hours before they were able to get her out. And then taking her to the hospital and then moving her to another hospital. And it was an awful time for all of us, but the family seemed to be just kept together, you know, those of us who was left, and I was the eldest at that time, and I had to see to everything. Of course, most of us went up there I stayed with a girlfriend that worked in the first aid, and got it from there, and then I had to keep running when I had time off to go see to the funeral and all, and got my father buried and all, and then got this home, and we had to get some money through. We were all working. I was in the first aid and wasn't earning too bad of wages, and Violet helped out, and Johnny, and so did Aggie. She worked in munitions, you know, and so we all helped out and got some things for the house, so that we could have a little bit of, you know, togetherness in it, and able to care for my mother and all. She was alone most of the time. And then I'm not sure, it must have been then that Aggie got married or something, because she was with us for a while. And then her and Jack came and lived with us in this home. My mother and I had the front room, and they had a room of their own. And then we all lived together like that for a while. And then I had to give up my job to look after my mother. She started to be sick. And Violet was expecting her first child or second child at that time. And they had a house, you know, up there of their own too. But his father was dead. Johnny's father had died, but he had an aunt. He had his uncle, and his grandmother lived with them too, and they all went up to his house, and we knew it was impossible for us to go up to live there because there were so many there, although we did go up for a couple of nights to stay, because I was off, and I needed somewhere to live. I did stay with this girlfriend for a while, but it was an awful time going to, as I told you in the story, to seek my father and know that it was him. Is there anything else you want to know now?
Maggie and Jack lived in Ireland for a long time.
Oh yeah,
before
they had a house. Johnny and Violet had a lovely home, and then Aggie and Jack took over this home that we had gotten.
Oh,
and,
and that's where they lived?
Yeah,
Is that the same home that when I went over to visit them,
yeah, must have
they
been.
were in?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, it must have been. But I left that home, to come over here. I signed over the deed to them
Uh-huh.
of that home and give them that. So they lived there. They never had any family either.
Do you remember what year it was when Aggie and Jack moved over to Canada?
Oh, I know that it was about this. It wasn't long after. I think Johnny and Violet went over first,
Yeah.
because about their wedding, that they went and got married, and Billy had seen them,
Mhm.
and Violet never knew, or Johnny, anything about the wedding, and they were kind of upset. They didn't speak for a while, after, but it was through. Then they went off to Canada, and they did keep in touch with Johnny and Violet, and it was them that got them out to Canada, and then Violet, or Aggie and Jack, then got out there too through Johnny and them and all too. They all
Yeah.
got out together.
It seemed to me like it must have been about 1977 that,
Yeah, I can't
Jack and
remember the
Aggie.
years much.
well, my mission ended in 1970.
Yeah, that's
No,
So it was
1975.
it was
It was
after that then.
1975, and I visited them
Yeah,
at
you
the
did.
end of my mission.
Uh-huh.
So it must have been about 1977.
Yeah, they weren't too long after Johnny and Violet went out there. They seemed to get over there after them and stayed there all those years. It was,
Now, how did you say Johnny and Violet got out to Canada?
yeah, well, it was through John, their son, their firstborn John, and
Oh, he had gone over to Canada.
yeah, he had went there. You see, that's what they done. They made all these arrangements and didn't confer with the parents, and that's what hurt Aggie and Violet and Johnny, that they were kept so out of
much in the
things.
dark.
They didn't speak to them for a while. Of course, they went out to Canada, but
Is that John and Myrtle?
yeah, John and Myrtle. I couldn't think of her name there, Myrtle. Yeah, so they had them little John for son, and he's Myrtle was a nice. Her mother, I'm not sure whether her mother was a Protestant or a Catholic.